Bye. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Knock Knock Eye with me, your host, Dr. Glockenflecken. This is your one-stop shop for all things eyeball related and occasionally not eyeball related. I've got a couple of those today. I've got a smorgasbord of topics for you. So first, I'm not in a great mood, and I'll tell you why. It's because I had like a mini fridge in our like family room that was leaking, and I didn't catch it soon enough. And before I know it, there's a large wet area on the ground floor of our house. It's a 2-story house, ground floor of our house, and also across a wall into the neighboring bedroom. And like a little small leak, been going for who knows how long. And before you know it, I'm out like $5,000 to like dry everything. The drywall is all wet. We had to like insulation replaced. You want to talk about transparency? How do I even verify like how much something costs to replace in my home? I have no idea. Plumbing, restoration. Don't get me wrong, they're doing a great job. It's just like they could give me any number. I was trying to think, like, at what point would I balk and be like, you know what? I'd rather just buy a new house than like have to pay this. Obviously, that'd be a very high number, but like I was like 4,000. Okay, sure. You got to like remove a board. You got to bring in all these fans, replace some carpet, get into the wall, dig in the crawl space. There's probably dead mice in there. That's kind of a dirty job, right? So like, okay, I could see how it could add up to 4,000. I guess 8,000. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how are we supposed to know? I guess you get multiple bids, but like I don't want mold to grow. Like I don't have a lot of time. I feel like these companies know that. And that not saying they're taking advantage of me, but maybe they are. I don't know. It's the same thing with like cars. I'm not a car guy. I got a general sense of like, you know, an oil change is not supposed to cost me $500. Like I have some common sense. But, you know, when you're talking about like more like in-depth stuff and the engine and the transmission and things like, I don't know. It's not, I could Google around, I suppose. I don't know. Dentistry, like there's all these things. And I bet people also say that about like the medical system too. Like, I don't know, is it supposed to cost that much? And so like, I totally get like the irony of me as someone who like provides medical services that are probably like, what do you mean cataracts? What are you talking about? Talking about multifocal lenses, like an epiretinal membrane. What is that? What does that do? And then I'm like, they get charged for like seeing me for doing all these things and doing imaging studies. So that's confusing as well. Maybe just across the board, folks, we just need more transparency for everything. And I don't know if that would help. Like in the case of the restoration folks coming and drying out my wall, I guess they could itemize the damn thing. Like maybe they did that. I just didn't look closely enough. But like, wow, what is the cost of replacing an insulation for like a 10 by 12 area? I don't know. I trust you. You're a national company. I assume you're doing something right. But then again, so is Optum. So it's just like, who knows? Who knows? It's like a big black box, and I'm just frustrated right now. I don't mean to dump my personal issues onto all of you, but the more life experience I get, the more I understand people's frustration with the healthcare system, I guess is what I'm saying, because it goes both ways. It really does. Okay. So anyway, that's just my frame of mind that I'm in right now, but I've got some interesting things to talk about. So let's start off with one of my favorite topics, obviously corporate practice of medicine. Just to say, since I've been really looking into like this issue and all the practices and the hospitals and things that are being bought, uh, I'm in looking at this Oregon state law, SB 951. Again, the strongest corporate practice of medicine law that we have in this country as of today, and how that might affect things in the state in the future. And got to be thinking, like, Well, what about all the ophthalmology private equity firms that are operating in Oregon? Like, what are they going to have to go away? And I started getting real giddy and excited, and that it kind of counteracted a bit of my depression, my restoration leaking mini fridge of kind of depression, and so and I know who they are too. And the reason I'm excited about this is because with this Oregon state law in 2029, all companies have to be compliant. That means every medical practice, not hospitals, medical practices, hospitals were exempt. It's a whole nother issue, whole nother can of worms to try to figure out. But the medical practices have to be owned independently without influence from other companies, private equity firms, outside investors. Now that might be a big problem for a lot of people out there, but I want to focus on ophthalmology because yeah, I am what really like the first time I remember getting angry about private equity was just learning how involved they are in the world of ophthalmology. And I'm mad at my fellow physicians for allowing this to happen. I'm mad at just the healthcare system for allowing this to happen and people not fighting back and pushing back and doing what they can to just keep their practices going and maybe combining forces with other physicians. Instead of selling to private equity, why don't you go get your other doctors or recruit or so? Just have, figure out a way to maintain physician ownership. I just like, they're just like screaming it, into a void. And so, but now this law is like, okay, well, now something's going to happen because 2029, all these companies have to be in compliance with SB 951. So, the big ophthalmology private equity firms. All right, there's one in particular that I'm going to talk about because I just learned they're opening up another office in, I think, the Salem area, and it's called NVISION Eye Care. Now, NVISION, there's like multiple different companies with the word NVISION, but this is NVISION Eye Centers. NVISION Eye Centers. And I've known about this being a private equity firm, and they have a minority owner who is a physician who is has a minority stake, but the majority of this practice, which operates all along in the Pacific Northwest and also the West Coast, just California, Arizona, so in the West, basically. Um, they are owned. They were recently back in 2020, by a group, a company called I never even heard of this, Ontario Teachers Pension Plan Board. Ontario Teachers Pension Plan Board. Now that sounds like, oh, it's owned by teachers. No, 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 no. It's not. It's not. It's owned by a pension fund. All right, that has $250 billion in assets. So it may not sound like a private equity firm. In essence, that's what it is, and it's a Canadian company. Like we got enough private equity problems in the U.S. We got enough firms here. Why do now Canada's getting in on the action? What do you guys? I thought you guys were so nice, and you're coming in, you're buying up a bunch of ophthalmology practices. I mean, again, we're just as complicit as you are because we sell. And again, I talked about this last week. Ophthalmology, it is, as opposed to other areas of medicine where it's a little bit more outside your control, like emergency groups, anesthesia groups, hospital-based groups who get contracts stolen out from under them. Ophthalmology, we're a bit more complicit because usually we have to sign the papers. The physicians who own the practice, all right? But still, I don't like it. I don't like it. So, Envision, owned by, and they do a bunch of LASIK, cataract surgery, right? There's just they're a private equity owned practice all over the West Coast, owned by Ontario Teachers Pension Plan, majority stake. So, come 2029, guess who has to no longer, according to the law in Oregon, no longer is allowed to have a majority stake? Is Ontario Teachers Pension Plan. So what I hope happens is when inevitably 2029 rolls around and nothing has changed, that we take NVISION to court. That's what needs to happen. And we need to do that for like everybody. All these companies that are private equity owned or owned by pension plans, right? So good luck, folks, because now we've shown it works. We'll get it done. We'll get you out of here. Get out of the state of Oregon. And then the more that happens, the more other states are like, yes, let's do it. Let's kick them out. I was just shocked by that. A Canadian company? I didn't even know that was legal. You can do that? I guess that makes, international companies own lots of stuff in different companies, right? So in different countries. So, but anyway, I've never been a fan of Envision. Never heard good things about Envision. Not to say anything about the doctors that work there, because again, I've always said this, even in private equity owned practices, there are good doctors who work in those practices. It's the conditions they have to work in. It's the pressure that they get from management. That's the reason things like SB 951 in Oregon exist, because of that and the outcomes that it brings that are bad for patients and doctors and communities. Okay, moving on. I've got good news. The Ebola outbreak in Africa is unlikely to result in the pandemic. So did you know this? I just learned about this recently. In Central Africa, there is an outbreak of Ebola. I feel like we get one of these every so often. The reason I think this is making like the rounds on social media is just because of the U.S. pulling out of the World Health Organization back in January of this year, which deprived the WHO of its biggest funding source, cut about $500 million out of the WHO. Now, from what I've read, news sources, like it doesn't seem, you can't really connect like, oh, loss of funding, that's why Ebola that's why we have an outbreak. That's why people have hemorrhagic fevers and things and are dying. No, you can't. I mean, there may be some downstream effects like down the road. You can't, there's no like causal relationship here. So I always want to make that clear. But what that lack of funding for the WHO does is it weakens their ability to do surveillance, to monitor for outbreaks. So maybe the outbreak didn't get found as quickly because of a loss of funding. That's entirely possible. But also like staffing, lab support, just rapid response, like coordinating a response to deal with an outbreak of something like Ebola. You guys remember, do you ever read The Hot Zone? Remember The Hot Zone? I was like the first things I remember reading like about medicine and biology and spooky stuff. So anyway, WHO, we sorry that our country, that the US did that. That's no good. But fortunately, it doesn't seem like the Ebola outbreak, which number of cases the WHO has put out is maybe about 28,000 people infected. Massive numbers. Over 11,000 deaths. That's a big deal, but fortunately, like unlikely to spread to become a pandemic. Thank goodness, because from what I remember about Ebola, not great, folks. All right, let's take a break. We'll come back with some ophthalmology.
Hey, teacher besties, I'm Andrea Forcum, and I am so excited to share with you that my book, They Never Taught Us That, is available right now. It is everything an experienced or first-year teacher needs to manage the chaos of the modern classroom, including some anecdotes to make you feel a little bit better. Because if there is a way that you can screw up, I've probably done it. It also has advice on how to build trust with families, how to manage grading and lesson plans and IEPs and everything else that they never went over in your teacher prep program. They Never Taught Us That is available everywhere right now.
Hey, Kristen, remember how you love eyelid mites now?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
Well, there's a lot of confusion out there. I want to clear something up.
Okay.
All right. People think they can get eyelid mites from dogs and cats.
Can they?
No. These particular Demodex mites are specific to humans.
Okay.
So spread from dogs and cats is not expected. That's a myth.
Can't get them from cuddling our poodle.
No. Demodex mites that cause blepharitis live on humans. Most adults already have them. They just usually don't cause problems. It's when they overgrow that they can lead to itchy, red, irritated eyelids. Those little collarettes.
The crusties at the
That's
base of the
right.
eyelashes.
Right.
And the good news is there's a prescription eye drop available for Demodex blepharitis.
That is great news. To learn more about eyelid health and Demodex blepharitis, visit miteslovelids.com. Again, that's miteslovelids.com to learn more. This ad is brought to you by Tarsus Pharmaceuticals. All right, we're going to talk eyeballs, but not human eyeballs. I'm going to cross over into veterinary land. Now, I've learned my lesson in the past by not trying to pretend I'm an expert in animal eyeballs. I gave a talk to, it was veterinary critical care, and I acknowledge, I told a joke. It was this massive crowd. It was awesome. Awesome show. Awesome event. Veterinarians, they're some of the greatest people. They really are. And there's no but coming after this, by the way. This is just flat out. It was a raucous event. People were wearing the helmets and the unicorn headbands and all the things. But what I told a joke at that event about how, something about, it's basically self-deprecating about human doctors thinking they know something about animal stuff. And then later on in my keynote, I showed a picture of my dog Milo, who has horrible entropion and deep set eyes and has had all kinds of eye problems, partially blind. And I basically said, but I'm an ophthalmologist, so I kind of know what was going on. I said that, like, I'm an ophthalmologist. I was basically saying, like, I didn't probably don't really need to take my dog in to see a veterinarian ophthalmologist because I'm an ophthalmologist. I did the thing, you guys. I did the thing that I just made jokes about, and they all called me out on it. They started laughing. I was like, "What's so funny?" It was like, it had dawned on me. Oh, I just did the thing. So anyway, I'm not going to do that thing. I'm not going to pretend I'm not a veterinary ophthalmologist. All right. I am an expert in human eyes, but I have learned some things about cow eyes recently because my kids' school or middle school had a medical day. And this was the most fun I've had in quite a while. It was great. I was, me and a partner of mine who I work with, we tag teamed the cow eye dissection station. And so we got all these, you can just go to the butcher. I say butcher, like, where is a butcher? It's like, I feel like you see like movies from like the 50s and like they're set in the 50s and 60s. They just got like a butcher shop. It's where you get your meat. I get all my meat from like Fred Meyer, like the grocery store or Costco. Like, are those, do butchers work there, or are there like actually like distinct butcher shops out there? Like, if I do a Google search for a butcher shop, what's going to come up? I guess I could do that right now. I'll do it after we finish recording. It just got me thinking, like, I don't think we just have like butcher shops. Anyway, wherever your butcher shop is, you can go and get a bag of eyeballs, the cow eyes. So we showed up, and as a box, there was about 50 cow eyes. They're like vacuum sealed, basically, and they're preserved to the best that you can. Now, when you look at a cow eye that's been preserved like that, the cornea is very cloudy. It's basically complete cataract. So they're not like normal, healthy appearing eyes, obviously, because they're dead. And so what we did though, we would have like a group of like 10 to 12 middle schoolers that would rotate through. They'd come in, 2 to an eyeball, and we did the dissection the initial dissection for them, which involved taking a very sharp scalpel, which we were not going to give to 8th graders, especially the 8th grade boys, because I saw what they were trying to do with scissors, and it was alarming. And so what we did is we cut the eye in half for them so we could take the top off the eye and look at all the structures inside. And I didn't know what to expect. Like, I remember what I was like in 8th grade. I was like a good student, right? So I would have been very interested in this. But I know some of my classmates who were crazy. They were wild, misbehaved all the time. I didn't know what to expect. I was pleasantly surprised, especially you hear now about everyone, they're all iPad kids and they don't care about learning. Like that too much social media. That's all that's out there on social media about like Gen Z, and which is what these kids are. They're all Gen Z, like young Gen Z. And but I was so pleasantly surprised by them. They asked questions about the structures in the eye. They were paying attention. They weren't there were a couple. A couple that really like burrowed a hole through the eye, put it on the finger, and made it like talk. Yeah, there were a couple special cases out there, but for the most part, everybody they were well behaved. They were respectful. Nobody hurt themselves. We only had one kind of like little bit of a cut on the finger. But I would just want to shout out all of these 13 to 14-year-olds because they were very kind and interested. Now, granted, it's an interesting thing, like looking inside of a cow eye. So the anatomy, let's talk about that. And I'll talk about the thing that I actually learned about. The anatomy is generally very similar. It's a mammal, so it's going to have very similar anatomy to just a human eye. Everything's much bigger. You got a cornea, you got a lens inside the eye, you have an iris, you have vitreous, aqueous, you have an optic nerve, there's retina. But the big difference and explains very nicely the difference in color versus like daytime versus nighttime vision between cows and humans is the presence of a structure called the tapetum lucidum. This is this reflective layer of tissue that sits right behind the retina, right underneath the retina. So you peel the retina back, there it is, tapetum lucidum. And Google it. It's this beautiful, like turquoise, brilliant fluorescent colors. It looks like you would see in like a pearl. It's brilliant. It's a brilliant colors. It's got this blue sheen to it. Very, very pretty. We don't have that because the purpose of this tissue is that it acts like a mirror. So the light comes in through the front of the eye, it hits the retina. All right, and let's say we're talking about a cow here, or other animals too. So lots of mammals, cats, dogs, foxes, raccoons, deer, horses, cattle, sheep, certain marine mammals as well, like dolphins and whales. They all have this. The light comes in, goes through the retina, and then hits this tapetum lucidum, and it bounces the light back through the retina. And it does that to give the photoreceptors a second chance to absorb those photons, which significantly enhances night vision. So this was why when you look at cat eyes or dog eyes at night, they seem to glow in the dark. They're glowing because that light is being reflected, and it has to pass through the retina multiple times in order to get the most use of what limited amount of light is coming into the eye at night. So that's why cows, dogs, that's why cats, they see so much better at night than we do because of this tapetum lucidum. And the photoreceptors they have, they have much more limited kind of cone based photos. So basically color photoreceptors that can see different wavelengths of light. So theirs are on a totally different wavelength. But this tapetum lucidum is what really allows them to just maximize their nighttime vision. Super cool, super cool. That's that eye shine that you get. And that scary kind of glowing eyes that you see, from like a coyote, or you're like encountering a wolf in the wild. First of all, don't go where wolves are, especially at night. Probably not a good idea. But then I started thinking about, so we started pointing out all this stuff to those 8th graders. We cut through the optic nerve. We saw a big optic nerve there. And so shout out to those cows. whatever, however you feel about this type of thing. at least at least we were using those parts, the eyes, to educate. And it'd been a long time since I've seen like any non-human eyeball. So it's cool to see just the large, how big it is. The other thing is the lens. It was cool to open up the lens and you see it. It's like basically a lens is like an onion, and this is for humans too. It grows in layers. So can form layers and layers and layers upon layers over time, and eventually it gets so dense in the center that it starts to get yellow and darker, and that's when you start developing a cataract. But when you cut open into the lens, you can actually see those like onion-like layers. Very, very cool. Um, the other thing that would to note about the cow eye was the pupil. So just like goats, if you've seen a goat eye, it has a rectangular pupil that's more more horizontally shaped. There's more extension of the pupil horizontally than there's vertically. So it's like a rectangle on its side, and where the long side of the rectangle are the horizontal parts of it. And the reason that is because those animals, they need better peripheral vision to look for threats, right? That makes sense. Like we don't need that. We need a nice circular pupil because our eyes are on the front. We're predators, I suppose. Some of us are worse predators than others, but we're generally predators in the food chain. And so our eyes are straight ahead, allow us to focus in on our prey. We don't need as much peripheral vision, all right, because our eyes are not but off to the side of our heads like a goat's is, or even a cow, or other mammals that have more of a side view to be able to keep them alive. So anyway, that's what I learned about cow eyes, and I am absolutely going to do it next year. And also, I just like the other big takeaway I have from doing this with those kids is teachers have such a hard job. I was exhausted by the end of this, and we had like maybe 7 groups throughout the whole school day, 7 different groups, and it's physically demanding to teach that long. We did one day. It was like I was comparing it to clinic, and I was probably more tired after just talking and teaching these kids and the physically helping them do things for a whole day. That was more exhausting than just being in clinic for a day, which was kind of shocked me. I was like, clinic's hard. That's physically demanding. No, nothing like being a teacher. That was tough. It was tough. So I also have a newfound respect for teachers, just because of how physically demanding that job is. I didn't realize that. Okay, last thing I want to talk about is a little bit about animal the vision spectrum. So I got interested in this as well, like thinking about looking at cow eyes all day, and in particular, like what the color vision spectrum is. And so the most high powered, super powered color vision out there, can you guess what animal it is? You're probably not going to get it. All right. It's the mantis shrimp. The mantis shrimp has 12 to 16 different color receptive cones. Now, to put that into perspective, humans, we have 3. We have 3. We can get most of the visible color, all of the visible color spectrum with those screen. We have red cones, we have blue cones, and we have green cones. All right, so there's the 3 different spectrum. We're able to get all of them through those, and so the mantis shrimp have 12 to 16 as opposed to 3, and they can also detect UV, infrared, and polarized light. And all that means, those are just different wavelengths of light, right? So that just means they have a photoreceptor cell that is activated based on a UV spectrum wavelength of light. We don't have that, so we cannot see ultraviolet light like we would see a blue sky, right? Or a yellow tennis ball. So we just don't have a cell that detects that wavelength of light. Other insects and animals, birds, bees, they also can see ultraviolet wavelengths, which will helps them to identify flowers and predators and all these things. So human-like vision, so 3 photoreceptors. So us, chimpanzees, most other apes, monkeys have very similar situation to us. Dogs and cats, they have dichromatic vision. So a lot. I was told growing up that dogs and cats have black and white vision. And please, veterinarians, feel free to put me in my place if I'm speaking out of turn or if I'm not saying anything correctly. I know you know more about this than I do. I'm speaking as an excited ophthalmologist who has learned recently things about animal eyeballs. Okay. I'm just sharing something that I think I'm very excited about with you. And so the dogs and cats, dichromatic vision, and it's mostly blues and yellows. Like they have a real big difficulty with reds and greens, but it's not great color vision. I mean, it's not great acuity anyway. So it's not like, oh, blues and yellows, they'll see that. They'll see, something, they'll be able to make out letters far away. Well, no, because they're dogs. They can't talk or they're not smart enough to read. Most of them aren't, at least. But so the acuity is not great, but they are able to discern a little bit of blues and yellows. In that spectrum of light, reds and greens, not so much. And then some animals, though, are completely colorblind. So like aquatic mammals, whales, dolphins, they see in monochrome, so shades of gray. And that's because really what they have to be highly adapted to see in low light conditions, deep water. So they've got this really strong, that tapetum lucidum. They rely on that a lot to reflect that light and just maximize the few photons that come through deep in the water so that they can see. But they don't need color as much, right? Because they need that really high contrast, dim light ability that we don't have. They could see much better in darkness than we can. And that's what I got for you for Knock Knock Eye for today. So hope that was interesting. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Go check out these episodes on the YouTube channel. That's the easiest way for me to see your comments, by the way, is on the YouTube channel at Glaucomfleckens. That's not my main channel. That's Dr. Glaucomflecken. No, we have a separate channel for the podcast. Go leave me a comment. And I check in on those every week before I start recording, see if there's anything I want to chat with you guys about or answer any questions that come up. So please go over there, and also help to leave a review, a like, something positive on anywhere you listen to your podcast, Spotify, Apple. That it really does help. So appreciate that. And thanks to my executive producers, Aaron Courtney, Rob Goldman, and Shanti Brook. Our editor and engineers, Jason Portizo. Our music is by Omer Benzvi. I am Dr. Glaucomflecken. Knock Knock Eye is a human content production. We'll see you next week.
Knock, knock. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching the episode. You can find more on that playlist over there. If you prefer to listen or you just had your eyes dilated, you can binge full episodes wherever you get your podcasts, or join the party over on Patreon, where you get early access episodes, hang out with us, get lots of exclusive bonus content. Hope you subscribe, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think.